Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today we're going to discuss the importance and perception of both first and third person shooters. And hopefully we can better address the stereotypes that third person shooters are more for casual players, while first person shooters are more for the hardcore player base. There have been many great third person shooters that have actually redefined and pushed the shooter genre in new directions. Max Payne, Gears of War, Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid, honestly the list is quite long and prestigious. Even some of the most iconic names in the industry, such as Halo, started off as a third-person shooter in their early builds. So what is the importance of choosing one over the other? Does it define or improve or even limit the titles you play? Often today, especially among the PC player base, the third-person shooter is viewed as more of a casual shooter, one that is going to focus on visual presentation over skill-oriented gameplay. Now, of course, this is not a fact of game design, but more of a perception from the community. Third-person games can in fact be very skill-oriented. Gears of War 3 is certainly regarded as a high-skill multiplayer shooter, where positioning and player movement are just as important as your aim. Even silly third-person games like Plants vs. Zombies can still be highly skill-oriented. So why then is the third-person shooter looked down upon by so many hardcore shooter fans? Admittedly, I do believe to a certain degree that third-person games will focus a shooter to be more reliant on strategy instead of skill. The ability to use an over-the-shoulder camera to see around corners without exposing your player to the enemy is something that will define the way your game plays. It creates a situation in which the defending player has an incredible advantage over someone being more aggressive. Again, there's nothing wrong with it, but unless you balance your game around this somewhat exploitive ability, you could unintentionally create a game that rewards camping behavior. And games that promote camping are often frowned upon. Not always though, as some camping, or rather defending an objective, is a realistic and valuable strategy. But playing a game that always awards the player who is willing to be stationary for long periods of time can be overly frustrating to anyone who likes to move around and take objectives. Now, Ghost Recon Online was one of the first third-person games I played that I also really enjoyed, but after moving past the novice level of play, I began to recognize just how much the third-person gameplay made some areas of the game overly frustrating. Players could simply camp an area where you had to go. You might never know of their location until you physically step out from behind cover, and the moment that happens, a hail of gunfire comes your way. This made some objectives nearly impossible to take, provided that there is enough campers in the right location, at which point I had to wonder, is this the kind of experience that the developers wanted? Why reward camping so much? It doesn't require necessarily a lot of skill to wait in a corner or by a ledge, stare over it with your third-person camera, and then blast the first unsuspecting enemy that comes your way. Third-person cameras will always allow for this advantage regardless of the game you're playing. And currently I've been enjoying the heck out of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. The game is highly skill and strategy oriented, but the third-person camera is probably the most powerful mechanic in the game right now. I can simply lay prone on a rooftop of a building, wait for somebody to walk by while watching them the whole time, and then at the moment of my choosing, open fire and obliterate them before they have any chance to react. In a game where you only get one life, you die pretty quickly, and rounds can last upwards of 30 minutes, it's certainly frustrating to die to this type of mechanic. And instead of moving around and exploring, the game often forces me into a mindset where I'm thinking, you know what, I'll just wait here for a while rather than peek my head out a window and get it blown off. And if the game was based purely on first-person mechanics, I feel like I would develop this mentality far less. Thankfully though, this is actually coming to the game in the near future. It's just a question of whether or not the player base will adopt it. I'm hoping they will, because not only will it be interesting to see how it changes the gameplay, but I think I will enjoy it more. Unfortunately, once a certain style of play is established in a franchise, changing it later can be quite difficult, especially when people are already used to playing the game in a very specific way. Now, some games, such as Star Wars Battlefront, have chosen to split the difference and allow players to use either first-person or third-person perspective the whole time, which upon hearing this at first might lead you to think that that's a smart approach, because then players can just use whichever system they prefer. Of course, the problem with this approach is that the first-person camera offers no advantage over someone using a third-person camera, so even if you prefer first-person, you will never be able to compete with a skilled player using the third-person camera. And then beyond that, there is of course the issue of bullet instancing for all third-person games. From a third-person camera, it's always going to be more difficult to tell when your weapon is in line of sight of your target versus the camera's line of sight. You might find that you are often firing into a barrier from your character even when your crosshair is directly on the enemy. This is because bullets in third-person games are often instanced from the gun, which could be blocked by cover that's impossible to see from your third-person perspective. This is something that's much easier to deal with in first-person shooters. Even if the bullets are coming out of the barrel of the gun, the height difference between the sight and barrel should be minimal enough that it won't affect your play too often, and it just teaches you to be more aware of your muzzle height. So the main disadvantages from a third-person camera are exploitive peeking tactics that can really ruin some of the aggressive playstyles in a game, and also the bullet instancing issues of bullets going into cover or not landing where you think you're aiming. That being said, there are some benefits to the third-person shooter. One of the main benefits is the ability to see your character. This can be really important in lots of storytelling games to get a better sense of what your character is going through. Witnessing their physical conditions can put you more in touch with the character and how they are handling the journey you take them through. Action sequences or max pain bullet time effects will always look cooler from a third-person camera. It should feel more like watching an action film. And in case you haven't noticed, a lot of the games are hiring cinematographers from the film industry to make their games feel more cinematic, so naturally a third-person camera lends itself to this type of storytelling. It also allows you to see how your character changes, whether it's physical changes, power-up effects, or simply new gear that makes you look different. In a first-person game, you're more reliant on cosmetic changes being visible to your friends, but rarely is it something you enjoy yourself. First-person games like Call of Duty try to remedy the situation by allowing you to show off your gear or your player model on the score screen. If you're a good enough player, you can pimp your gear there, but otherwise it will be something that only other players can see in-game, or often something you will need to enter into the menus to check out your physical appearance. So for loot-oriented games, third-person games can really influence the desire to get more items to enhance your appearance. The Division certainly took advantage of this, and so does the new Ghost Recon Wildlands game. Both are heavily loot-oriented and can greatly change up your character's physical appearance, something that you wouldn't appreciate unless you were playing it from the third person. Unfortunately, though, outside of storytelling, character customization, and showing off some snazzy character animations, there really aren't too many gameplay improvements that come from a third-person camera. So when it comes to skill-oriented first-person shooters, the third-person camera is often something that can be used to exploit the game mode and frustrate players who want a more authentic combat experience. If cornering and peeking aren't a big factor in your shooter game, then it may affect the gameplay less. But since most tactical shooters rely heavily on cover and peeking mechanics, the third-person camera almost always detracts from the gameplay. Anyway, I do find this specific topic pretty interesting to discuss. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about the first-person versus third-person debate. I'm particularly curious to see how it changes up the gameplay in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. I've been trying to get a few friends into the game, and some of them just aren't interested purely because of the third-person camera. I know a lot of people that won't try a game just because of that design mechanic, and I am actually one of them. I'm a little bit more open-minded about it, but if I see a game that doesn't look amazing to me right off the bat and then it's got a third-person camera on top of it, I'll be like, nah, no thanks guys, I'll pass. You know, it's just too much of a deterrent if you're looking for a highly skill-oriented game that is going to have fun gunplay and peeking mechanics. I like to discuss topics like this because I find them interesting to me personally. I hope you guys find them interesting, but in addition to that, I do know a bunch of developers watch these videos, and I know a lot of them make first-person shooters or third-person shooters, and I hope it inspires discussion among them, especially when designing a game from the ground up. Choosing your camera placement is going to affect the gameplay for the rest of that game. Do you want it to be highly skill oriented, or do you want to focus more on narrative and storytelling elements? The camera choice is going to greatly affect the outcome, or at least it can. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the first versus third person debate, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.